let's talk about behind the leg, right? Like if I had a dollar every time I heard that, that the horse is like behind my leg, like he's so lazy. I thought I would just add a couple things to what you can think about under this heading of like behind the leg. Because one of the most interesting things about it is Charles always says this, and he actually went to an academy, like a real life academy, to learn the art and uh, like development of like dressage. Also 3-day eventing and jumping. Like Charles actually was a fantastic jump rider and loved eventing, but then like also, because in the school you learn all the things. So he would always say, this is such a new modern term. We never had a class about it. No one ever said this in a lesson. Like, behind the leg did not exist. The horse was either on the aids or not on the aids. And I just thought that was so interesting because like when you think about like the time, and why would that be something that like, yeah, horses can be lazy and horses can be non kind of calm, and kind of slow. And that's okay, but then they have to like be taught to be able to get quicker, right? Like Charles also always says, like we have to do what the horse needs and not what he wants, and it's usually the opposite. So you're like your calm, easygoing dude is gonna need to learn to like speed up a little bit and get a little bit pep in his step. And the one that's running obviously has to learn to slow down. And the one that wants to have its head up needs to learn to stretch down. And the one that wants to be buried in the sand needs to learn to get up. And so that's always kind of fun to think about, like, who is my horse? Like for me, um, I have all kinds of different horses. Like you could never say like, oh, she rides that type. It's like we got all the types. We got fat, we got skinny, we got tall, we got short, we got ponies, we got Dutch harness horses, we got all the things. Which I find really fun actually. That's really interesting. But when you think about like what does my horse like to do, and is he on my aids? And are my aids on him? Is also a great thing to think about. But this whole thing of like Charles always saying like that didn't exist. It's a little bit like when I went to school, we had to walk barefoot and up a hill through the snow 10 miles, and it's just like when he's like, when I was in school, like we never had behind the leg. And I was like, well, I know, but I think like horses were like calm or lazy, and he's like, yeah, I mean, I'm not saying that that's not happening, but um we didn't deal with it the same way, and it didn't, we just kind of got the horse going. um and so that was always a really interesting, like I love when he starts to give his thing about behind the leg, his lecture about behind the leg. But another interesting idea to think about is the horse needs to not only be in front of the leg, but in front of the driving influence. And so when we think about that, like, what does that mean? And that does not mean like chuck your hands forward at his face. Like, that's uh, not part of the driving influence, right? That would put you in front of the motion and a little bit too forward and off the seat, and maybe put the legs back too far. So when you think about like, is the horse going in front of my leg? I also like to think about like, is he going in front of my seat? Because the seat has three functions, right? It can drive, hold, and harmonize. And every time the horse does what we want, the seat has to harmonize. And so there is this like quieting down of the aiding system so that we can truly determine if the horse has listened and actually gone forward. So when we think about being able to um, get the horse in front of the leg, we also need to think about, is he in front of my seat? Or is my seat perhaps blocking. The horse or like the rider's seat will always trump what the leg is saying. If you are tipped forward in your pelvis and have an arch in your back, and you don't have a neutral spine and the ability to swing in the hips because you're too far forward on your pubic bone, the horse will feel like the energy from your leg, but then like run up into like an opposite position seat, and his energy will like run up against the blocking seat. And so when we're too tight in the hips and not following with the seat or leaning too far forward, a lot of times the horse will feel like he can't go forward. So I want you to think about too, like, is he in front of my driving influence? And can I also send the horse in front of my seat? So another idea is when we drive forward, we always need to make sure when we put our foot on the gas pedal that we are not holding on to the handbrake. And I know it sounds like duh, like it sounds really like, well, of course, but it is actually sometimes really hard not to be in the horse's face, and so I think to really, and again, like not throw the reins forward, um, to completely like chuck the reins forward, but to have on purpose a lighter contact or even a little bit longer rein so the horse never feels counterdicted by too much rein pressure. A lot of times what horses feel in their bodies is that they're like tight in their back or they're tight in their hips, and the back isn't allowed to swing, and so therefore their limbs can't take a longer stride because their back is tight, or they're too tight in their neck because the rider is holding too much. And so we have to make sure we're not like holding onto the horse's face and then like kicking at it to like you're just like kicking it up against this wall, and the horse will just get super frustrated about, I don't know what you want me to do. You're putting your foot on the gas pedal, but your handbrake is on. And so always think about like, is my contact elastic to allow this energy I'm going to create from my driving influence? Like, is that able to swing through the horse's big joints, right? The hips and the shoulders, but also, can I allow the horse to swing in the back and not be like super held in the contact? So that's always something too, to really have that idea of, am I not blocking in my rein, right? And so going into that, then we also have to think about like not blocking in our seat. And so then we have to ask the question to ourselves, right? If the horse is like I can't go forward, you have to like ask yourself, like, if I'm in trot, am I riding all three dimensions of the trot, which is vertical, horizontal, and the lateral piece. If you'd like to know more about that, you can join my academy because there's many videos in there about that. But the pelvis, right? If we are going to borrow the horse's legs, we have to make sure we aren't like stuck on there like a bit of a clothespin, you know what I mean? And just like, the horse's hind legs are not moving like a kangaroo jumping. So why should our seat bones do the same thing? Okay. So there's a lot more to unpack about that, and I don't need to do that here. I just need you to ask yourself, like, am I truly following? Like, does the horse feel my pelvis moves in harmony with his pelvis and his spine, right? If we're like a one-dimensional like clothespin up there, the horse is going to feel like, I just feel like I can't move underneath my rider. And so always double checking that you're riding all three dimensions of the trot. Another suggestion I have is perhaps warming up in canter. I mean, we all see it at every clinic. We feel it, right? The horse always trots better after he's cantered, right? Because in the left lead canter or the right lead canter, there's only one oscillation in the horse's hips, making it the best gait to warm up in. Okay. So a lot of times when I like get on and the horse is like, and it doesn't want to go forward, I might pick up the canter and I might really allow the horse to kind of like play in his body or yeah, Megan just said, when in doubt, canter it out. It's amazing. I highly recommend it. It really kind of solves like all my problems. um, but that, okay, so the canter is also typically rounder because it's the only naturally bent gait. So when the horse is laterally supple, many times it would be longitudinally more supple. And so getting up into that canter not only allows the horse's hips and low back to kind of warm up gradually. We also think about the canter being like a building gait and the trot. I always like to think like Charles always says, like the trot canter is the horse's friend and the trot breaks the horse down. And I like to think about it like the canter makes deposits into the bank and the trot kind of spends it. And so you want to be careful about like, how much canter am I doing? I should always do more, a little more canter. But also, if you have a horse that's like creaky in the trot, a lot of times getting up to canter can really help supple that horse's hips and pelvis. And because in trot there's a double oscillation, right? And in canter, it's either the left lead or it's the right lead. And in trot, it has to be like 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. Both hind legs have to swing the same amount. Okay. So that can be like a great way to warm up your horses. Another thing is, and I'm just like on a rampage here about the correct length stirrup. And I think I talked about it last week, or I talked about it also in my lecture about fine changes. No, I talked about it in my working student Zoom, Ask Me Anything. And so many times when I have a horse that's behind the leg, I mean, I kind of shorten my stirrups. And again, a correctly fitting stirrup should not be lined up with the bottom of your foot. It should be lined up with your ankle bone. So your toe actually has to go up in order to put your foot into the stirrup. Okay. So because we don't get long legs by riding with like long muscles, right? We get long legs by short stirrup and long muscles so that there's tone into the calf, right? If our toe is down, we're going to have a little bit like blah, 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 in the calf. And we need to have, especially with a horse that's behind the leg, we need to make sure we have a precise leg and we need to know exactly where we're going to add that energy to that horse's body. We can't just be like, hey, having those like rubber truncheon like flying around. Like Charles is always like, he always calls it the rubber truncheon of like, whoa, like an octopus leg. No, it needs to be tight, and not tight, right? But it needs to be like short stirrup, neat leg, so it can be quiet. So when you use it, you can use it and then you can not use it, right? But if the leg is just too long, the stirrup is too long and the leg is just like, not only is the leg, you're kind of holding on with your leg, which is kind of an aid, not kind of, it is an aid. And so the horse is like, should I go when you're pressing the leg on? Or should I go when you're trying to sit my trot and you're holding on with your legs? What is it, right? So a short stirrup allows you to have a precise leg and be able to like create fire and then take the leg away because you will be in control of your leg. Because when you're in control of your leg with your short stirrup, you cannot be in control of your leg when the stirrup is too long. So check that. Also, biggie thing. Nine times out of 10, everyone at a clinic who asks me, like, oh, he's really behind my leg. And I'm like, well, that's because, my friend, your leg is too far back. You are riding around in a rein back canter position or a piaffe or a piaffe leg position, which is legs farther back behind the girth. The nerve endings to drive a horse forward are located right behind the girth. Okay, so that means we got to get those legs way more forward, and you got to be able to squeeze and take them off, right? A holding leg and a leg farther back, like a rein back, talks to the nerve endings that roll the sacrum under, right? So your leg is telling the horse to be like I'm gonna get ready to rein back. I got my hind legs under my body, and I've lifted the saddle pad, which is great. That's a great thing, right? But not if you want to go forward necessarily, right? He's like, feeling this like feeling of your foot too far back on his body, kind of like back near the false ribs, which really some horses hate. And also when they're back there, they can also they can like push out against you. Stallions are real good at that. Some mares can do it too. So you got to get your legs in the front of the rib cage, right? Way up by the girth. Okay. So that's an interesting idea too, which will also get your seat in a driving position as well. Oh, this one I like too. So then I also think about too, when we're complaining about that the horse is behind the leg and we hit him with the whip or kick him with our spurs because he's just always so lazy and he doesn't want to do it. Sometimes I tell my riders, I'm like, well, you should be happy that he doesn't have the whip and he's not hitting you because your seat is not developed enough to be taken forward. you know like no one hits us with the whip to say, your left hip, all that stress you had at work this whole last 2 weeks has really affected your left hip. Usually it's the right hip because I think most people are right-handed, so usually it's the right hip. And then he just won't pick up right lead canter and he's so lazy and he won't pick up the canter, and then you hit him with the whip. But actually he should have the whip and he should hit your right hip because that's actually the cause of the whole thing. Because of course, as Charles always says, it's a riding sport and not a horsing sport, and humans have to learn to become riders, right? So I wrote down in my notes, I'm like, develop a seat worth taking forward, right? We have to develop, we are the ones that are climbing aboard as this foreign object on top of this wonderful, amazing animal called horse. Let's just be grateful that they even let us do any of this, right? I mean, it's amazing. So this gratitude is awesome. But to pay them back for allowing us to climb up there, we have to develop a good seat. We have to be we've got to be in good balance. We have to have independent hands. We have to be able to follow the swing and be part of their body, right? So that we don't feel like a foreign object. Because when we're off doing our own thing, or we're off rhythm, or we're, off, they want to slow down because they're like, listen, lady or man, right? I don't know what you're saying. And every time I want to go, you feel like you don't want me to go, right? And so we got to make sure we're not sending any mixed messages. So developing that seat that's worth taking forward for the horse. And then there was the magic moment over the weekend where I told Kim, I'm like, you need to take your legs forward, a little bit, turn your toe out, and I want you to squeeze for 3 strides as hard as you can. And then, because we get into this rhythmical kicking. kicky, tap, 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 like, and nothing's really changing. And I mean, in a way, like, in order to be heard at a whisper, sometimes you have to shout, right? Because nobody wants a monotone, because we're gonna ignore that totally. So I had her like squeeze way up by the girth, like 3 strides as hard as she could until that horse like a I don't know, like you just have to a little bit like squeeze the horse through a little tiny keyhole that's like up there, right? And the minute the horse goes, take the leg away. And then ask again and then take the leg away. And this horse, it was breathtaking. It was so amazing. Like it was like turned into the most beautiful horse at the clinic. And like I know she always had like hope this horse would turn into that, but like it was a different animal. Like within like 24 hours, it was like amazing. And that's not because like, oh, I'm such a great clinician. It's like, no, I mean, I just teach what Charles taught me, and it just works because it's the science of riding. And it has a lot to do with physics, and it has a lot to do with, yeah, just like riding in the right way. So, this idea of like where to put your leg, how to do it, how long you should do it for, and where else in your body you should think about going with as well. It's just amazing what a difference this can make. So this idea of being able to like squeeze and like hold your leg on there and like push it through and then let go, game changing. And like that's the thing, like there are times to, of course we want to be in rhythm when we want the status quo to like, when we approve, like we ask the horse to do something, we approve, we harmonize, right? I said that in the beginning. We can drive, hold, or harmonize, or like drive, change, and harmonize. And then you like, I like harmonize with the next change, if you don't like it, you change it. He's going too forward, half halt, harmonize because he did it. All of these moments of like, hey, that, I always say like it's a game of hide and go seek. And the horse is like, what am I, is blindfolded. Like, what am I looking for? And you got to tell the horse every time, warmer, warmer, oop, colder. That's not it. Running on your forehand, that's for sure. That's not it. Right. And then the minute he half halts, warmer. How do we say the horse is warmer? The release of the aid. Okay. And so that's also part of letting the horse know what we want him to do is also staying in rhythm, right? Like being in sync with the horse in breath, in leg, in swing, in your pelvis. Both the pelvises have to move the same. We want to be in rhythm. That allows the horse to just, like, the best thing the horse can do is not feel us, right? As this, like, again, like this outside entity on top, on board, this horse. Like the biggest gift you can give them is to be part of their body, right? A deep adhesive seat. But when we don't like what's happening, it's okay to like disrupt the rhythm, you know? So, you're riding your horse and you're like, leg, 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 tap, tap, and the horse is like, la, 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 right? How about leg release, and all of a sudden the horse is like, whoa, that you broke up the monotony of what I just was ignoring. And so it's interesting to be able to be like, get their attention, not always by just like hitting them with the whip. And so, because, being able to drive the horse forward is extremely important because, if we cannot do that, we're a little bit like held hostage. And then the horse rides us a little bit, right? It becomes like, ye who is drivable is submissive, right? You know, and I was like, I know I don't want to be like, but at the end of the day, like as the rider, it's a safety thing that you have to be the alpha and the horse has to be the beta. And in order to, you know, control that, right? Or create that is we have to be able to move their feet, right? That's not the same on the ground. That's the same. We got to be able to control where their feet are going and how fast their feet are going, right? Like what track am I on and how fast on that track am I going? And if I cannot drive the horse forward, I'm being held hostage, right? And then, I mean, what can I do except hope it gets better, right? Or hope he decides to go. You know, we have to be able to like find our way to that place that we can go. And Charles always talks about, like, one of our mantras is like the legs energize and the seat modifies that energy and the reins verify to the horse that he's doing a great job, right? Or he made the right answer. And when we think about that, like, why is that important that there's energy? Is because we always must remember we don't collect the horse, we collect his energies. And so we have to make sure that we can create enough energy. So I hope you guys take, kind of take it to heart, like all these different reasons maybe why the horse isn't going forward, and maybe you can find a piece to your puzzle. So I hope you guys found this helpful and make it a great day. And thank you so much for joining. I'll see you soon. Bye.